It's funny because now I think about it, Chris. You told me you were ready, but the way you told me was that you were ready to rumble.
Yeah.
Little did we know at the time that would be to rumble with a grasshopper.
And rumble I did in a very gentle way, Dan.
Yeah. And my favourite part was when you thought it flew at you.
It was going for a fight, and I was like, I don't want to fight you, buddy. I just want to tip you out the window and get on with my podcast.
There's a picture. You've got like a piece of paper over it in a glass. Look very delicate. You look like you'd looked after it.
Yeah. Not even like it's a Specsavers leaflet, I believe.
How did you? How did it get in your house in the first place?
I've no idea.
Oh.
Why? What are you thinking? It couldn't have got that high to get through an upstairs window. Maybe like when we had the doors open at some point downstairs. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm speculating. I think can they not stick to walls and stuff?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I'm worried. I mean, it might just come in another window right now. Have you put the picture up on the video?
Yeah, if we're including this, they can see the picture now.
Yeah, there you go. So there's what I've just been dealing with, a grasshopper, pre-record. But got rid of that swiftly with the aim of cracking right on with episode discussion. So pleased to see we've achieved that goal.
Cue the music.
Cue the music.
Hello and welcome to Stephen University. This week we'll of course be discussing not the answer, Chris, but the question.
The question. So, I'm still thinking about that.
Is this the episode where Ruby fights a grasshopper?
Yeah. No, the question is in fact an episode that deals with the Ruby of it all. So Amethyst and Stephen find Ruby with Greg sitting there chatting. Greg says something very sweet. He says that, he never knew she was Pink Diamond, but she never knew that he was Greg D'Angelo, is it? Whatever the name is. So Ruby seems fine, though. Ruby seems happy to explore herself for a while. She's pointing out that she was kind of immediately put with loads of other rubies and then immediately with Sapphire. Now she can spend some Ruby time. So she decides to be a cowboy. So off they go. And cowboy it for a bit. Amethyst turns into a horse. Ruby does a nice song about how she's a lone cowboy and enjoying it and not a fusion anymore, etc. Good little musical number, and but then Stephen, who at first is very much like, what do you mean? Don't you want to refuse with Garnet? Stephen kind of says, refuse as Garnet, sorry. Stephen kind of says, look, I'm happy for you to be whoever you want to be, and she reveals that while she is having fun, she'd have more fun with Sapphire. But she wants it to be their choice. She doesn't want anyone else to be making them fuse, making them put together. So this concludes with her deciding to propose. And in my favourite moment of the episode is when Steve and Pearl and Amethyst are watching the proposal.
Mine too.
And then Amethyst, Pearl looks surprised at the horse, and Amethyst goes, "It's me. I'm a horse." Like,
so good.
Because it's just this really sweet image of all the family watching, the heart of the crystal gems, which I think is probably Garnet. So yeah, there you go.
I'm a horse. It's so good. So when I was talking about an episode or two ago that Nadia prefers sort of the rompier episodes, this is the sort of episode that she prefers to like the mythology ones. She's quite happy, to just, have Ruby sort of like play about for 5 minutes and then, get a few other gags in and then do a bit of emotional stuff. Like that suits. That sort of stuff is like, Nadia will take that any day, the week. That's like basically her favourite sort of content. So, you've pinpointed basically her favourite moment from this whole episode, which is that it's me, I'm a horse, which is a glorious moment.
I loved it.
It is brilliant. It's a proper belly laugh moment. It's not a sort of, breathe through your nose laugh, like it's like a proper legit, like you'll laugh at that out loud. It's really good. How do we feel about the episode on the whole, Chris? Third of the bomb. There's 2 more left.
Third of the bomb, the least intense of the bomb. I really enjoyed it. I think it's one of those. It's sort of almost the bomb equivalent of. There's not too much to say because basically this episode is some really good gags, a really great song. I imagine most of our discussion will be on this idea of marrying. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed it. I think romp is a good way to describe this episode. It's a good, fun episode, and I think it's especially coming after the last two,
which were quite heavy.
It feels like a piece of light relief.
It's very well
and then
placed.
And then I imagine things ramp back up for the next 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, no, I really enjoyed myself. It's probably the least like, oh, God, let's dissect this and this and this since in a while, probably really.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that back in my head. I'm going back to the last episode that didn't have massive impact on everything. So it's probably whatever came just before Can't Go Back. What came before Can't Go Back?
Is that Letters to Lars?
Yeah, probably that.
Yeah. But even then, there was the big sort of formatting of it, which I really enjoyed.
And they set up a lot of cool stuff that's come back since, like Ronaldo's telescope, which has been featured twice now, I think, in other stuff. So yeah,
yeah, definitely.
Cool. So should we start? Can we start with like? Okay, so I've really been torn on this episode, Chris.
Right. Okay.
The first time we watched it of this set of sort of 5, it was my least favourite by some way, because I really liked the destination and the concepts and that notion of, if Garnet's the answer, the question is, will you marry me? Because if we marry, then we'll be choosing to be Garnet. And that means that Garnet really is an embodiment of love. And all that is so perfect and so beautiful. And that's been planned from the beginning. There's no way that wasn't an early discussion. I think Rebecca said that so much as that in a recent interview for NPR. Which at some point we should actually talk about that interview, because she said a few things in that interview that were absolutely fascinating. Maybe we'll get to that a little bit in a minute here, depending on how much there is to say. But one thing I was frustrated when I watched it the first time, because what I perceived it to be was an episode that goes, Ruby wants to be independent, wants to be free of Sapphire, Oh no, that was a lie. Now they're going to get back together. And it felt cheap, because there was no moment of her sort of realizing no moment of her sort of being won round to that idea and changing her mind. Instead, it was just, it had turned out that that's not really how she felt. She was just pretending the whole time. How convenient, now they can get straight back together without actually having to resolve any of the issues. That's how I saw it the first time round. Second time round, this viewing, well, third really, because this is my third time seeing this episode for some reason. But this time round, I got a lot more out of it, and I really appreciated it a lot more, because what I realised, it's not I misunderstood a little bit. Not misunderstood, misinterpreted. I don't think it's easy to remember that wanting to be independent is not the same as not wanting to be with the other person. And I think that I was waiting for a solution to this problem of, I want to be independent. How can I be independent if I'm always going to be with her? But that's not really what it's about. It's about you being your own person and making your own choices, but doing it with someone you love. And the lesson that Ruby learns is that she is still free to be independent and herself, but she can be happier doing it with someone she cares for. She's not giving up her independence by being with Sapphire. And it's like the episode presents you with that paradox at the beginning of, she wants to be independent because she's never been independent. How can she be independent and stay with Sapphire? Well, the answer is, people shouldn't be that codependent. And second viewing, I got all that from it. And, it's not even that subtle. I don't really know how that didn't all hit me properly the first time I saw it, truthfully. But for some reason it just landed a lot more clearly this time round. And I don't know if that's that I let the episode down as a viewer in the first viewing and didn't pay enough attention or didn't read enough into it or didn't think it through enough, or if it's just that the episode maybe isn't as clear as it could be and therefore it's easier to miss and you pick it up better on a second viewing. I don't know. I think
there's an element of, because for me it's I interpret it as a perfectly reasonable and a honest reflection of how people feel when they have a fight or indeed break up, where you do that. Oh no, I'm independent. I'll be fine. And actually, you're not. You do want to be with someone. I think part of the problem is, to some degree, they have their cake and eat it. Especially when it comes to the song. The song's really good, and she looks really happy and confident in the song. There's no sense that she's beginning to doubt what she's saying, or there's no, there probably is, and I can understand the argument for that. She is on her own. It's quite, it's sung quite low. Maybe, that's an indication because she's low. She's depressed without Sapphire. But I think they do quite a good job of making Stephen and the audience feel like she is okay with the idea of just being Ruby. So I can see how you would interpret it like that. But I think that it's such a complex thing she's going through, and it's a complex reaction that they've presented to us.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think that is the crux of the problem, because my issue when I thought it was a little more clear cut the first time round wasn't that they had her want to be independent and then sort of got them back together. It was sort of how quickly and easily it happened, without any real turning point as such. I think it's important that you justify when a character changes their opinion. And I think you're right. I think if they'd have spent more time earlier in the episode just giving us a hint or two that during that she was still missing Sapphire, then it might have felt a little bit more organic. But I think they explain it well enough. Rewatching it, the conversation that Ruby has with Steven, in the night, the one where Steven's like, "Well, look at, Lonely Lasso. He's he's a he's a like a loner himself. He goes out on his own, but there's someone he loves and misses, And it was like, it's okay for you to feel both." And that's kind of that's really interesting. This that idea that these two ideas aren't as contradicting as you think they are. It's okay to want to be independent, but also want to have a relationship like that. It's in fact, in a weird way, it's important to have both. A little bit of independence and the ability to share your life with another person. Both those things are wonderful, and if you can get a balance of those two things, then you're winning, aren't you? Really.
Yeah, but for me it wasn't. I think and I'd be intrigued as to what other people think, but I think you're putting more stead in the independence angle than I did. For me, it wasn't about wanting to be independent. It was about wanting to be the one to choose to be with Sapphire. It was about wanting to be together because they want to be together, and it was about wanting to be together, but not necessarily have to be Garnet, and it was their choice. It wasn't. They weren't doing it for Rose. They weren't doing it to symbolize something. They weren't doing it for any reason other than them wanting to do it. For me, it was more about that than this sort of independence angle. Although I can see why you're,
that's certainly that's the conclusion they land on. That's where it goes. But the bulk of the episode is spent with her seeking her independence. Oh, I always have had to make decisions with Sapphire. I've always had to consider what she wants. I've always been a part of a thing. Now I get to be me, independent, do what I want. And it ultimately manifests itself as her realizing that it's more about making the choice to be Garnet and not just believing another person. It's about making the choosing is important because that's how she can be independent. But at the beginning, the search for independence is what leads them to the desert, to wander, because she's looking for independence. And in the end, weirdly, what works about the episode is what's clever is that she starts by looking for independence, but but ultimately finds it in the relationship that she felt was stifling her independence, because she's making a very deliberate choice to be part of it, which is being independent, choosing to do that.
But is it her feeling that it was stifling her independence, or is it her doing that breakup thing of, oh, well, no, well, that's fine, because I get to be independent and free. I can do all the things I've ever wanted to do,
Maybe it's a bit of both. I certainly don't think the show isn't nuanced enough to be suggesting that there's two elements of it, because, here, how it manifests in the world of Steven Universe is a bit more literal, because, of course, in a relationship, somebody could say... the thing is that Rebecca Sugar talks about this in that NPR interview. She talks about how fusions are relationships. They function like relationships in the show, and they use fusions to discuss human relationships and how they work or don't work, as the case sometimes may be. Here it's about a relationship that no longer works that they're trying to make work again. And I think, it's part that, but how it manifests here in the world of Steven Universe, in the context of a show where these two people they don't just hang out, they literally fuse together. Yeah, you probably do lose a little bit of your independence being a fusion, a little bit, because your minds are literally like meshed into one, right? Like you 100%.
Yeah, but again, that's the relationship parallel. You lose a little bit of your independence being in a relationship.
100%. It's what I'm getting around to. So I'm sort of saying, yes,
this is a weird way for you to break up with me, Dan.
Well, it had to happen, Chris. What I'm saying is that in the show, it comes out literally as Ruby being like, I don't want to be part of this thing anymore because I lost a little my independence in that. But I think what the idea is, it's working on both levels, because it's that whole thing of, in the reality of the show, yes, they've been physically fused together, therefore literally independence was lost. But it works on that sort of one-to-one scale that the show often uses, where fusion represents a certain sort of relationship in this occasion, and that independence thing. So I think in a weird way we're both sort of right. Whereas when I'm talking about it, I'm sort of talking about it from the practical in show perspective, and you're talking about the subtext that they were trying to get across with the relationship. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about the same thing, but feeling like we're not. Maybe we need to fuse, Chris, so we can get on the same page.
Oh, no, I can't think of anything worse than being able to hear and feel your thoughts.
Cran.
I mean, huh?
Cran.
Cran?
Chris and Dan.
God.
Cran.
No, Boolin would be better. Or
Dillingham.
Yeah. Or Dooham.
We'd be a terrible fusion. What would our fusion's personality be like, Chris?
Or Cranial. No, that doesn't work. Dis would be better.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Commenters
below, what does the Chris Dan fusion act like? I want.
Oh God!
I want to know what that character is. If anyone's got any ideas, please comment below.
It would be your determination to be proven right meets my determination to always be the middle ground and be like as correct and not offensive as possible. So it would lead to just a silent person. So it'd be these podcasts would just be silence. Just be someone going, I'm thinking this.
Chris, I find it hard to believe anything that any being that ever exists that's half me could be silent.
Yeah, or me. I'm sure a lot of people would say, so that's fair. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think you're right. I think it's a very layered approach to thing, and I think it's fascinating. And the show, has done it in more than this episode, but it's the ability to, if you want to view it from the subtext, if you want to view it from the deeper meaning of it, if you want to view it as a young child that just sees Ruby wanting to be a cowboy, it works on every single one of those levels. And the end result
is the same, isn't it? The destination is the same, regardless of which sort of version of the road you're focusing on.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so clever.
The idea of a wedding, and this will obviously presumably be more relevant for the 2-part final of this bomb, but like,
so is that your prediction / assumption then that the wedding is what we end on?
Oh yeah, you got to either that or they do the wedding next, and then there's a big cliffhanger involving blue and yellow or something. But I'd prefer to think you end on the wedding.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, that was also my assumption.
Yeah,
if that helps you at all. I was just curious to get you to clarify because you said that like it was fact, which I suppose from your perspective it isn't yet. But I was just interested.
I'm just assuming.
It does make by far the most sense though to end on it.
Yeah, you just build up to that, wouldn't you? Especially if you, I don't know what next week would be, wedding planning, I guess, but like you could really ramp up that excitement. The notion of a wedding is so beautiful. It's like, one of the things I love about it is that subtext of fusions being a relationship is just put front and center. Like, it's not very subtexty now that we've got them kissing and getting married. Like it's very out there for all the haters to see, and I love that. And it's not even about the haters. It's just about it fits so beautifully in this world. It's such a lovely notion.
Yeah, actually, while I'm on the subject, I misspoke actually, because there was an episode where I was sort of saying like, you want them to have like a more overt relationship, so that just an FU to the censors, to the countries that are censoring these episodes. But yeah, apparently they have like kissed and stuff before, and embraced and held hands and like done stuff that I was sort of just suggesting they might.
I thought they had, if memory serves.
I can't remember exactly how our conversation went, but I know I got see. This is the funny thing about recording these out of sequence with the release, is that we'll say stuff, I'll forget we said it, and then I'll get 80 messages about something and be like, I guess I said this. I don't remember, but I guess I did. So I woke up one morning after one of the episodes went up to a bunch of people saying like, Ruby and Sapphire definitely did kiss at one point. Cool. Okay. I obviously forgot in the heat of the moment. I honestly don't remember. Yeah. It's really bad. I do feel bad when that sort of stuff happens. I mean, what do you think sort of like, so in a world where you're putting the wedding as like you sort of the end of the bomb, what do you think the sort of like the payoff to that is, other than just a wedding? I mean, is a wedding enough at this point to just, unless, I mean, where do you draw drama from that? It can't just be a wedding.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that.
Just a straight, functional, nothing goes wrong wedding.
Oh, hell yeah! Like, how cool would that be? But no, I mean,
it certainly booked the trend of television weddings, wouldn't it?
Especially because it's well, that's what was. I know you're not a big fan of it, but that's what was so beautiful about the first series finale of Gavin and Stacey, which is a UK sitcom, which fundamentally stuff happened before and after, but the wedding itself, we didn't even see the service. Like, we just saw her walking down the aisle, them saying the vows, and then it was just about the people later, and it was, there was no fights, there was no bust up. Yeah, I'd love the notion of that, but I think, it's a 2-part episode, so I'm pretty sure you have Blue and Diamond attack, and hopefully they attack after the actual wedding bit, and we get this sort of glorious wedding moment. That would be my hope. I mean, I'm just assuming blue and yellow. It makes sense. I
mean, certainly they're the biggest looming threat left, because, Jasper's sort of bubbled, Bismuth bubbled. Like, what's left? Do you know what I mean? Like, it is pretty much, like, of all the threats that have been in this show, all the monsters they've come across so far, and if it was just a generic monster, if you were going to inject some excitement into the wedding that isn't just... Because there was 2 ways I saw it playing out. One was, some sort of showdown with the diamonds. And the other was that the wedding had some kind of emotional character drama undercutting it.
I don't want that. We've had, assuming the next episode sort of takes this path and also deals with someone, I guess, Steven's or someone else's reaction to this Pink Diamond stuff. 4 episodes of character stuff. 4 great episodes of character stuff. That's enough. I want a loving wedding or a wedding interrupted by plot. I think because I don't want a character drama would imply friction. I can't see any reason. You've pulled Ruby and Sapphire apart. You've done that, so they can't have friction. That seems weird to me. They're not gonna have doubts or wedding day jitters, surely. And what? One of the other gems is gonna have a problem with Ruby and Sapphire? Nope. So I don't want any kind of inserted character drama or friction into that. I'd much rather it came from externally. It came from, I don't know, Lars crash landing on the beach or, something like that. And then, Lars and Sadie end up getting married instead, I don't know.
I mean, I suppose Lars crashing on the beach with Emerald close behind would be a pretty cool way to crash a wedding.
Oh, that would be cool. And then you'd keep Yellow and Blue back.
Yeah. Because, you got to pace yourself. I mean, if we're definitely getting another season beyond this. Season 6 is happening, so I suppose you've got to pace yourself somehow.
It's 2 parts, and you told me to watch it on a big TV, so I reckon.
I told you to watch it on a big TV because it's got some spectacular visuals. Whether that means blue or yellow would be that'd be your assumption to make. Spectacular visuals could definitely be a giant spaceship crashing on a beach, though.
I'm making those assumptions. Absolutely, it could. Absolutely,
no, and trust me, you're not alone. During this, sort of batch of episodes, there were a lot of people making very similar predictions to the ones you've just made. I was always thinking, though, when I thought about character drama, I didn't think so much about conflict as... I'll be honest with you, the thing I thought about most was Steven's repressed a lot of this stuff. I was wondering if the wedding and seeing all the sort of... like, in all this chaos, something beautiful happening, a wedding, might send him to a dark place. Like, do you know what I mean?
Think of the character of Steven. Sorry,
I know, but surely,
that just doesn't sound like Steven.
But think back to like storming the room when he confronted his own, when he confronted his own interpretation of his mother. Like,
yes, but
that stuff is there.
I'm not saying it's not there, but I don't. But your sentence was something about a wedding could stir up dark feelings. Like it's
not quite that literally, but like the idea that like it would be hard with all that's going on. A wedding is like a beautiful thing, but it surely would have an undertone of, well, there's a bunch of shit that going on outside of this. That's really.
I think it's way more in keeping, in my opinion, it's way more in keeping to Steven's character to have Ruby and Sapphire's wedding be the perfect distraction for that.
Sure.
So maybe you do a plot about him going nuts planning the wedding, and everyone's a bit like, well, "Are you just trying to distract yourself?" And he's like, "Yeah." Maybe you do that, but I don't think he spirals into a dark place. Because I think it has to be about love. It has to all be about love, and I think the love he has for them would conquer anything like that.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of like the character stuff, but it was just that was me sort of playing devil's advocate to my own thought pattern at the time, which is when I said, there's 2 ways this ends. It's sort of we do end up with some sort of big spectacular sort of showdown, or we go character. And when I said or we go character, I wasn't necessarily thinking character conflict. That was my way of sort of expressing that there are other ways it could be character that aren't conflict, such as, and then my example was the Steven one, which I agree with you doesn't really make the most sense of all the options, but it was more an example of me sort of saying that there are other ways it could go from some sort of showdown. Because keep in mind that the 2-parter that finishes this bomb isn't the last 2 episodes of the season.
No, Thank you, Cartoon Network, for randomly dropping one at Comic-Con and making Dan and I have to frantically rework the schedule before he goes away.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
for that.
Very
I'll
nice
say
of
it right
them
now.
to drop an episode of Comic-Con. You know, great in any other circumstance but this one for us.
Yeah, I'll say it now. We've managed to move a lot of stuff around. I've had to take more time off work. We're gonna give you the Comic-Con episode. If any other episodes drop, I'm not sure you'll get them before Dan's away. So if the last episode of the season drops, I apologise now if that's
There might be a small delay.
a little bit later. Yeah,
it depends.
But
If the last episode drops now, we might have time between me returning home and the date it would be due to go out if we were just going to keep going through. Right. So it would be a recording much later from having recorded the first of those two. But we could, I think from the date I get back to the date the episode that aired at Comic-Con, I think we'd have enough time to record one between that period.
Right, okay, fair enough.
So I think we'd be okay.
Yeah, so you might get that. But yeah, from our perspective, they just dropped the Comic-Con episode. So we've shuffled some things to make sure we record that. I just think... what I said before, basically, in terms of the character stuff, I think we've had the character stuff. I don't know what we're going to get next episode. I'm intrigued. What triv have you got, Dan? Is there triv?
Well, very quickly before we get to triv, since we've got a few minutes just before because there isn't a huge amount of triv, I just want to very quickly talk about the thing that that Rebecca Sugar said on the NPR interview.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Okay. I thought it was really heartbreaking and really sad, but she was talking about the creation of Garnet, and she sort of she bottled telling the full story. And that's a very British expression. Like bottling it is sort of like getting a bit scared halfway through and sort of backing out. She started telling a story, and it was a little bit about Garnet's creation and the ideas that build up the premise of Garnet, and it's very relevant to this episode, of course. And she was talking about she was with someone at the time. She was essentially in an interracial couple, and she was sort of accosted on the street by some skinheads, and she described being sort of shoved up against a wall, and then she got a bit. It's obviously very uncomfortable for her talking about it. She didn't really want to get into it, obviously, but it's really fascinating for me to know that like such a visceral and real life circumstance led to Garnet, because I always thought, because Garnet just makes so much sense for someone to come up with outside of even something horrendous like that, because it's just like, well, she represents love that maybe the gem society doesn't accept, so it's representative of love that modern society in human terms might not accept. But to realize quite heartbreakingly that it's based on such a real experience for her makes it all the more powerful, weirdly, to me. And I applaud her being so brave as to sort of go into not as many details as I think she was going to for a minute. I think for a minute she was going to tell the full story, and I think she sort of edged away from further descriptions of how it all played out. But
yeah, I think edged away is a kinder phrase than bottled it. I think if you
I didn't. I realized my phrasing was terrible there, but my point is, while she didn't go into the full details of the story, she told enough of the story for me to know that like she went through this really horrific experience, and it informed this character, and I find that both very fascinating and very sad. And I grow even more and more respect for what a great person Rebecca Sugar seems to be. Very strong person.
I can't wait to, when I'm caught up, explore the interviews with her and stuff. And I think that certainly, if you listen to the words of something like Stronger Than You, it goes back to the kind of thing you were just talking about, and the notion of, well, you can say what you want, but as this couple, we are a united force and stuff. Like it always is. I mean, it's not at all comparable, but it makes me think of whenever I hear anyone say about a couple, oh, that won't last, or I'll give it a year. I always think, even when that sentence is said about someone I don't know, I always think, I fucking hope they last like 4 or 5 years. And then, you know what I mean? And then there's vindication, and then there's fuck you. Like, don't fucking predict someone else's relationship. That's up to them. Like, or when people have, say 5 or 6 happy years together, and then they break up, and it's like, oh, well, it's like, well, they had 5 or 6 happy years in this lifetime. What are you talking about? Like, I just think the thoughts of teamwork and thoughts of a couple, it's about what that couple does and goes through when they're together, and any character that symbolizes that is a really important thing, and any character that says that just because society is saying don't be together, love will conquer that, is an incredibly important message. And what a beautiful way for Rebecca Sugar to turn those experiences not into anger but into art, and
something significantly beautiful, like something really brilliant. Yeah, she's great, and every time I hear an interview with her or watch her at a Comic-Con panel or whatever, I more and more respect for how thoughtful and soft-spoken and wise she is, and you wish for a tenth of that. You know what I mean? As a person, she genuinely seems to be an incredible person with a real passion for her work, and a real sense of what it is that she's doing, and yeah, I can't help but respect all of those things, and the strength she showed, even in telling the bit of the story that she did tell. You're right, it was unfair of me to use the phrase, because bottled it usually sort of has a negative connotation. It's not how I intended it, but thinking about that phrasing, it was probably inappropriate. Because it was brave of her even to tell the bit of the story she did. There was no need for her to do that. She has generally proven to be a very private person, and obviously people are fascinated in her, which is so unfortunate when you're a private person, that people will be so interested in you and your life, because it's very clear that her life has informed heavily these episodes of this great TV show. So she sort of slightly shot herself in the foot by making such good TV, because it makes people want to know more about her.
But that's partly social media and technology in today's society. That wouldn't have mattered. You know who she is, you know who Russell T Davies is, you know who Damon Lindelof is, but name a showrunner from 30 years ago, you probably don't know who they are. No. Unfortunately, being a showrunner now, being a director, being a writer, comes with a public interest that just kind of wasn't there all those years ago.
I guess none of these people asked for this, did they?
Responsibility.
Huh? I guess none of these people asked for any of this.
No. It's like, even like there were kind of, I think Stephen Moffat said something, or there was an element of when Chris Chibnall took over Doctor Who. Stephen Moffat said something that made me think, ooh, is Chris Chibnall not going to do that side of things like Russell T Davies and he did? And obviously, he was at Comic-Con and stuff, so it would appear not. It would appear he is going to do those kind of stuff.
He certainly so far has been quieter though than both of those two, but we'll see once the series kicks into full gear how much sort of press he does. Be interesting to see.
And like, on the one hand, as a fan, I'm like, oh, come on, like, do all that stuff. But equally, it's not what he was aiming to do.
That's the frustrating thing. So when I hear that, like we talked about in the past, that there's a long running sort of belief that the Rebecca Sugar based Malachite on an abusive relationship she was a part of, and now we know this, and it's like I feel bad for being so interested in it. But it's heavily informed the story of a television show I'm really interested in, not just from an enjoyment level, but from a thematic level. I watch this show because I don't just get entertainment out of it. I get there's a certain sort of catharsis from like analyzing it and understanding it and breaking it down and figuring out how it works and like taking the deeper messages from it and the subtext. And unfortunately, a big part of that leads to an interest in the person that created it because it came from such personal stuff. So it's a real double-edged sword for someone like Rebecca, who is, like I said, quite intensely private. So, but even I'm part of the problem because I'm this person, that does a podcast about the show, and I'm equally interested and wish she'd be more willing to talk about it, even though I know that's her call. Do you know what I mean? Like that, if she feels comfortable,
that's not really fair.
Exactly, it's 100. I acknowledge it's not fair that there's any mild even expectation of that. But again, it's one of the weird side effects of doing this sort of work, and I appreciate all that she does give in terms of the information she has sort of talked about in the past. But again, when you find the characters and the idea is so interesting, like learning where they came from and learning what inspired them is equally interesting.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. But anyway, do I get to the triv?
Yeah, what's the triv, Daniel?
So this episode, fittingly, aired on Independence Day.
Oh, nice.
Which, according to the trivia, considering it is an episode about Ruby trying to be independent, that was pretty appropriate. This is actually the 5th episode of Steven Universe to air on a national holiday, with the first 4 episodes being Stuck Together, The Trial, Off Colours, and Lars's Head. Although, wait a second. Yeah, those 4 all aired on the same day, didn't they? So, yeah, because they were a big special that aired on Memorial Day, 2017.
Is that the Wanted arc?
No, it is the Wanted arc, correct.
Oh no, it is. Yeah.
Obviously, the title of this episode is a parallel to the title of the episode, The Answer, and also a reference to the old idiom of "pop the question," which means to ask for a person's hand in marriage. The new version... this is the first time since Season 4 we've had a new version of the Crystal Temple's hand in the title card. So that title card, whenever we've seen it since Season 4, has been one of the pre-established, colour palette versions. Sunrisen, Sunset, the blue, the pink, all the different shades. This episode had a completely brand new sort of colour palette, sort of like a purpley one, that has not been seen prior to this episode, like a dark pink. I thought that was kind of cool because it's the first time we've seen that.
Yeah, I didn't notice that, but...
No, I didn't either, but it's pretty cool.
But it's still pretty cool.
First time they changed the traditional hand with the washing on it one since Season 4 in any way. This episode, we didn't talk about this either, this situation of it, Jesus. This episode confirms that Greg did not know about Rose's past identity as Pink Diamond. How did you feel about that? Do you think that made sense, or did you want Greg to have known? How do you feel... let me open that question up a little bit. How do you feel knowing that she confided in Pearl but didn't confide in Greg?
Well, I don't feel like she confided in Pearl. Pearl was given to her as a... Pearl was there for the whole journey.
So Pearl knew by default, so it was a question of shutting Pearl up. Okay.
I think Pearl was just part of that story. I thought it was really sweet. I thought it was a very swift, nice way to deal with the Greg of it all and deal with Greg's reaction. And I think if he'd have known, that makes it so much more complicated. Why didn't he tell Stephen?
True.
Why did she tell him? Who else did she tell? The notion that she just fully became... Because also it implies, that she was still partly... Pink Diamond. The notion with no one knowing is that she completely became Rose Quartz, and I think that's much cleaner and much more fitting. So yeah, I was a big fan of that, and I think it was very logical as well. There's too many questions, there's too many unanswered threads if you have Greg know, I think.
I 100% agree. I was simply fishing for your feelings, Chris.
Yeah.
But you echo my
Those are my feelings.
We've already talked about the DeMeo thing. Greg teaches Ruby how to play guitar. This is not the first character in the show that he's taught to play guitar, but certainly one of the quickest. Ruby was shown to be
that was really funny.
at learning the guitar after 10 minutes, which is apparently similar to how Paradox sort of picks up the basics of music in It Could Have Been Great, which I think that is about right, yeah.
I really enjoyed that gag when he was like, I only taught her a few hours ago.
Yeah, it was good. Apparently, the bingo sheet that Cartoon Network put up for Steven Bomb 7, as they dubbed it, one of the squares was Ruby learns an instrument, and that obviously did indeed happen.
It was a bingo.
I mean, it wouldn't have been bingo. I suppose if you had a line, you'd get a bingo. So did I explain what the bingo sheet was last week? Or was it a few weeks ago?
Yeah, you talked about it and like how some people did, but I think you didn't go into too much detail because of spoilers and stuff.
Yeah, well, the basic premise of the bingo sheet is they've done this a few times before, like a big batch of episodes have dropped. They put out a bingo sheet and you sort of mark stuff off as you go, and they put half the stuff on there is obviously fiction and half the stuff on there is stuff that's going to happen, and people always get really excited trying to decipher which is which. When we've watched all 5 of these episodes, I want to tell you what one of the squares said, because it is like, yeah, nuts. Anyway, we'll get to that. So yeah, that's. Ruby.
I bet it will come true at some point, whatever that square is.
Well, apparently one of the squares was Ruby moving in with Greg, which technically didn't happen. But kind of close, not far off.
Hinted
right?
at them.
Yes,
chatting to each other and stuff, which was nice.
Yeah.
I like those moments.
Yeah, and once again, a little bit into Rebecca Sugar's sort of history is that she based this episode off a trip that she took with her brother for her 29th birthday to Joshua Tree, which is obviously a national park in
cool.
California. It's kind of known for like being deserty. It's like
that's cool.
I'm pretty sure it's where Queens of the Stone Age are from.
Yeah, it's. I believe it's where Josh Holm took Arctic Monkeys to record Humbug.
Is that right? Well, there you go.
I think so, yeah. And obviously the Joshua Tree by U2.
Well, there you go. The logo for I noticed this one the second time round, and I was really proud I picked this up. The logo for the comic book Dolphin Tale is actually based off the logo for Disney's DuckTales. I spotted that. I was like, that's the DuckTales logo.
I spotted that as well. I was like, that's very DuckTales, yeah.
Yeah, and it is the answer. Lonesome Lasso is most likely a parody of the Lone Ranger. Makes sense?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I don't really know why you paused there for me. I'm not sure what more I can add to that other than...
No.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Ruby mentioned the occurrence of the events of the answer. We talked about that. I know we covered everything. Great. Cool. So... Yeah, how are you feeling 3 episodes into the bomb before we round this one up?
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it. It's been a solid bomb. I think it's had a lot of heart, no pun intended. I don't think there's been a weak episode at all. I don't think it's been as wanted.
No,
but then that's not a criticism. After the can't go back in a single pale rose, would you want that? Like I would. The thing I wanted after those 2 episodes was to explore the characters' reactions to this stuff, which is what we're getting. So yeah,
awesome. I agree. I think it's a really good bomb. I can't wait to get through it all so that we can sort of. I'm very curious to ask the question of like, where does this bomb sit amongst the other bombs, because there's a couple we've talked very fondly of in the past, and it'd be interesting to see how you feel this one.
I think I'd have to like look at the list, but it's a contender, but I think it's probably got an unfair advantage though, coming off of so much of this bomb is informed by a single pale rose, and it's got a 2-part finale, so it's got some tricks up its sleeve.
Oh, definitely. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I think that's everything for this week then. Thanks very much for listening. It's been a little bit longer than usual, but I think we had some really interesting stuff to talk about, so I say go for it.
I mean, it's only up to us, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I said go for it, and we went for it.
I think all the last ones have been fairly. I don't think we've.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
I think they've all been. Yeah, I think they've all been like somehow. I'm worried we're crept into like 30 to 40, and then it was 40, and now we seem to be creeping into 45 to 50.
I think that's just been these episodes because there's so much going on.
Yeah,
there's a lot more stuff to discuss. I think once we get back to if we ever get back to like Stephen and a townie, I think it'll be hard to justify making a 50-minute episode.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks very much everyone for listening. That's all for this episode. Obviously, come back tomorrow. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And as I said, come back tomorrow as we discuss Maid of Honor.